This is David with BestRest Products, home of the cycle pump tire inflator that has a lifetime warranty. Welcome to part 3 of air filters in the nuclear age. We've done 2 previous videos. The third one is the result of some comments that we got from some of the viewers, including a comment from the former head of research and development for K&N air filters. And he came to the office and we talked about the testing protocol, and he had some ideas, and we decided to include that in this next test. We've done a couple of things to the BestRestium air filter testing machine. One of them is instead of just pouring the BestRestium and the talc in through the top and giving it a chance to filter down, we're going to be pouring it into this mesh screen, which should help disperse the particles so we don't get a clump in one particular part of the air filter itself. The air filter fits into an assembly up above, and down below we have a secondary cartridge that will trap contamination. And that way we can view it in a camera shot, but we can also weigh the contamination that's accumulated in those cartridges. And we have identical cartridges that we've prepared, and we've weighed them before any contamination. So we can compare those results. Here we have a manometer. Manometer is going to be measuring negative pressure or vacuum. We're measuring the vacuum down here, which is after all of the filtration occurs. So this manometer is going to give us a reading before we start introducing contamination, and then as we put contamination in, the negative reading, the vacuum will go up. The final thing we're going to do is we're going to go from the original 12 grams of BestRestium to 30 grams. We're almost tripling the amount of contamination that we're introducing. And the reason we did that was from our K&N expert. He said, well, you know, the more contamination you get, the better the filter works. But we'll still flow air. So we're going to find out if that's actually true. If after 30 grams we see that the filters start to clog up based on the pressure readings, and also based on what we see here, that will give us some usable data. The filters that we're going to be testing today is the Uni Oiled Foam. This is the same filter that we tested in our previous video. We're testing a Mahle paper filter. For all intents and purposes, this is identical to the BMW paper filter, and the test results from our previous test showed that they were right on par. Now, this was cheaper for me to get, so I went with this instead of the BMW OEM. We're testing a K&N oiled cloth, which has been used before, cleaned according to instructions, and re-oiled. We're testing a Guglatech matrix filter that's been treated with a special oil that is water soluble. And this means that you can actually change or service the filter in the field using just dish soap, unlike the K&N, which requires petroleum-based solvents. This filter has been oiled very heavily on both sides, and we wanted to see how that would impact the filtration process. We're also doing a Guglatech oiled matrix. This was a filter that was sent to us by Italy for testing. And they spray only the front side. So this has a fairly light coating of the rock Eco oil on one side only. So it'll be interesting to see how these two compare. And finally we have the Guglatech's matrix dry. There's no oil, nothing except the matrix filtering material. So we'll be kind of comparing the Guglatech to itself, but we'll also be comparing the Guglatech to the K&N and the Mahle and the Uni. Now, in talking to the K&N expert, I asked him some very specific questions about how much oil should you use on the filter when you're re-oiling the filter after a service. And basically what he said is, yes, you could over-oil it, but because of the vacuum created by the engine, any excess oil is going to be sucked into the engine itself and go through the injection system or the carburation system. So you can over-oil, but better to err on the side of having enough oil than not having enough. Any excess oil is going to be sucked through, it's going to dissipate. And that's kind of the idea that we went with this Guglatech that we heavily oiled. We wanted to see, you know, how that's actually going to affect the filtration process. We've got everything set up. We'll get started on the test and we'll show you the results at the very end. We have the filter in place, we have a secondary cartridge in place, no contamination. Let's see what we get for a pressure reading. 1.409. Now we'll introduce 30 grams of BestRest. And our pressure reading is 2.079. Next we'll pull out the secondary cartridge, put a new one in, and we'll go to the talc test. With the talc, our reading is 3.631. And finally, we'll take a measurement with the secondary cartridge removed just to see what this filter is creating in the way of vacuum without a secondary cartridge. 0.564. This is the Mahle filter after 30 grams of BestRest and 30 grams of talc. From a visual inspection, you can tell that this filter is pretty well clogged up. You can see a large accumulation of talc in between the folds of material. Next, we'll test the Uni Oiled Foam. The filter's in place, the cartridge is in place. We're just testing it against the machine. 1.330. Now we'll introduce 30 grams of BestRest. 2.251. Now we're going to introduce 30 grams of talc into the Uni. The Uni's already taken 30 grams of BestRest. We've replaced the cartridge down below. Set that aside, we'll weigh it and measure it. 3.187. Here's the Uni filter without a secondary cartridge. The Uni's got 30 grams of BestRest and 30 grams of talc. Let's see what a pressure reading is. When we look at the Uni cartridge close up, looking inside, we can see large areas that are totally caked. Clearly that's not moving any air, and that's down at the bottom. The sides still have a little bit of porous look to them that indicates that it is still moving some air through the system. A lot of buildup on the center here where the talc just dropped onto the filter and didn't suck down into the passages themselves. Next we're testing the K&N, the oiled cloth. First we have the filter in place, we have a fresh cartridge in place. Let's get a pressure reading. 1.384. Next we'll introduce 30 grams of BestRest. And we get a pressure reading of 2.555. Now we'll take out the secondary cartridge, put in a new one, and we'll put the talc in. 3.785. Here we're testing the K&N. It's got 30 grams of BestRest, 30 grams of talc, no secondary cartridge, and let's see what that reading is. 0.7 3.750. And here's a close-up of the K&N filter after 30 grams of BestRestium and 30 grams of talc. The center part of the filter is totally filled with powder. The outer edges still have a little bit of fabric that I can see, but there's a huge amount of powder that is just sitting on top of the filter. Next, we're testing the Guglatech Dry. This has no oil on it. This is right out of the box, not having been treated with Eco Foam or K&N oil. We've got the filter in place. We've got the cartridge in place. Let's see what we get for a reading before any contamination. 1.268. Now let's put in 30 grams of BestRestium. 2.620. Next, we'll introduce 30 grams of talc into the filter that's already got 30 grams of BestRestium with the new cartridge down below. Here we're testing the Guglatech Dry. It's got 30-30 contamination, no secondary cartridge. Let's see what we get for a pressure reading. 1.336. Next, we're testing a Guglatech matrix filter. This was sent to us by Italy. They treated the top surface of the filter only. They didn't treat the bottom side, and they used the Rock Eco Foam oil. So it'll be interesting to see how this compares to the other Guglatech filter where I purposely treated both sides rather heavily. We'll see whether that oil makes a difference. 1.155. 30 grams of BestRestium. 103. 2.103. Now we'll take out the cartridge and we'll replace it, and we'll run 30 grams of talc through this filter that's been treated on the upper side only. 3.915. This is the Guglatech from Italy that's been oiled on one side. 1.492. And a close-up of the filter once again shows a buildup of talc on the center part. The sides still seem to be passing air. We have quite a bit of talc that's been stopped by the filter and is not passing through. Next, we'll test the Guglatech matrix that's been oiled on both sides, rather heavily oiled. It's got the filter in place, it's got a new cartridge in place. Let's get an initial reading. 1.266. Next we'll put in 30 grams of BestRestium. 2.451. Now we'll remove the cartridge and we'll replace this with a new cartridge, and then we'll do the talc test. Here we're testing the Guglatech that's been oiled on both sides, heavily oiled. The filter's in place. It's got 30 grams of talc, 30 grams of BestRest, no secondary cartridge. 1.378. And here's a close-up of the Guglatech that's been oiled on both sides. You can see a heavy buildup of talc and lots of leftover talc on the top of the filter. So we've concluded our test, part 3 of motorcycle air filters in the nuclear age. In this test, we tripled the amount of contamination that we introduced into the filters, both for the BestRest and also the talc, 30 grams as opposed to 12 grams. So this is really subjecting the filters to the worst case scenario that you would encounter on the trail. We had the Mahle paper filter, which is basically the equivalent of the BMW paper filter. In fact, Mahle may make them for BMW, I don't know. We had 3 of the Guglatech matrix filters treated in various ways. The first one was treated with rock eco foam oil, both top and bottom. This one came to us from Italy, treated only on the top, and this one was dry right out of the box. We have the K&N, which is oiled cloth that was treated with K&N air filter oil. And then finally we had the Uni Oiled Foam filter. Both the Uni and the K&N have to be cleaned and retreated using chemical solvents. And the chemical solvents come in aerosol cans like this. You may be able to find a smaller can, but as far as servicing in the field, you're going to have to carry these things with you. And when you do it, those are chemicals, so you can't wash them out in a stream. As opposed to the Guglatech cleaning system, which is a couple of drops of dish soap, put the filter in a Ziploc bag, and then use the rock oil to clean the filter. Now that oil is not hazardous, it's water soluble, so you can literally do this around the campfire, wash the filter, get some water from the creek and wash it, and be back on the trail in the morning. That's the beauty of this style of reusable filter. But how did these reusable filters stand up to the original Mahle paper filter? Well, in this extreme test, we found they're pretty doggone close. In fact, the more contamination that we introduced, the closer these filters came together in the way that they performed. And the charts will show that to you. We're going to show you pictures of the filters under ultraviolet light so you can see how they glow. The visual Mark I eyeball will tell you a lot about how much contamination went through the filter and was trapped in the secondary cartridge. And based on what I've shown you and the explanations I've given you, that should help you make up your mind about what you want to do in the way of air filters. So thanks for watching. I realize it's a 3-part series. It's long, but we've enjoyed making it. I hope you'd learn something from this. This is David with BestRest Products, home of the cycle pump tire inflator that has a lifetime warranty. We'll see you on the trail. Uh-oh. I'll prove a point to you.
Isn't gonna happen.
I'll get my Geiger counter. Okay. So just to prove that you're wrong and I'm right, I'm gonna, ooh.
See? Told you. Told you.
Oh, crap. Okay.
We're gonna have to put you in a landfill.